Please welcome the producer of Exit Through the Gift Shop, Jaimie D'Cruz, and the editor, Chris King. Welcome.
Hello.
I love that trailer, the world's first street art disaster movie. Who came up with that log line for the movie?
It was a joint effort, truly collaborative, like everything about this film.
So it's been 5 years now. The movie's getting a re-release on iTunes, which is obviously why we're here as well. But 5 years on, what does this film mean for you? What did it mean for your careers? Exit Through the Gift Shop. Jaimie, let's start with you. What did it mean for you?
Well, it's kind of had lots of it kind of sent me off in various different directions. So for a few years before I made Exit, I was making Channel 4 and BBC docs, kind of like fairly kind of normal stuff. And I was taken out of the picture for a good 2-3 years making Exit. So I was kind of slightly rootless when I came back, and I ended up starting my own production company. So
Okay.
that I've kind of, I now work for. I still make films for Channel 4, BBC, etc. But yeah, for myself rather than for a bigger company.
Absolutely. And Chris?
Well, I'm not sure it was a launch pad for anything particular, apart from, as Jaimie says, a couple of years of insanity. But subsequently, I've worked on Senna and Amy most recently. So I've carried on. I've always been a documentary filmmaker, so I've carried on doing that, really.
But is it a film that constantly comes up for you? Do people bring it up in conversation? Is it a film that you revisit from time to time?
I haven't watched it for 5 years, I have to say. Probably, have you watched it?
No, I haven't watched it for a very long time.
But
Are the memories too vivid?
on the odd event like this, where I see a clip of it, I always find it incredibly funny, and I remember how funny it is because it's a really funny film, and that's why we had great fun, largely, in the cutting room making it, really, because it was a gas.
Joy and pain, like most good things in life. No, actually, that's true. You watch the trailer and you think, oh, I might actually watch that when I get home. I won't, but one day I will.
One day you will. So tell me how it came about, because you almost fell down a rabbit hole in a weird way with this one. It began with you, Jaimie.
Yeah, it's a very long story. I'm going to make it very short, but in a nutshell...
We've a very long slot, so that's...
In a nutshell, what happened was Banksy, in the real world, had actually, in real life, met this amazing guy, Terry Goeta, and had kind of, in a weird way, kind of formed a relationship, a bond with him, and realised that this guy had an amazing treasure trove of film, video cassettes he'd been making for about 10 years. And he was, without giving anything away for people who haven't seen Exit, he was expecting Terry to come up with this amazing kind of the ultimate documentary about street art, and was underwhelmed by the results. And at that point he phoned me up out of the blue. I had previously known him a long time before, and told me that there was this amazing guy we needed to make a film about, and that's where it started. Me being told to meet the amazing guy, a Frenchman called Terry Goeta.
So out of the blue, completely out of the blue, you get this phone call saying, I want to make a film with you.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, had any plans to make something like that before, or?
Nope.
Yeah.
I think it was a trust issue, wasn't it? Because he's obviously, Banksy's quite guarded about his identity being revealed to the public, but you had maybe done something with him, and had been very cool about it, and he trusted you.
Basically, about 10 years earlier, so this was in 2008 when I got the phone call out of the blue, and probably around 10 years earlier, I'd kind of met him, hung out with him a bit. He wasn't at all well known, and we'd done a few things together, and then he'd never heard from me ever again, which I think meant that I was not going to be, trying to sell. Because obviously what happened in the intervening 10 years, he'd become a global icon.
Yeah.
And I think probably that's quite difficult for him, because people that he's engaged with in the past have, got works that they're now trying to sell for lots of money, or they might know who he really is, or whatever. And it's a complicated relationship. And I think my big asset was that he'd never heard a peep out of me.
So yeah, it's like a murder.
So yeah, I was just busy doing other stuff, making documentaries about chickens amongst other things, and it was a real surprise to be asked to, A, was I interested in making a film with him, which obviously the answer was yes. B, would I be interested in making a film about a completely unknown Frenchman called Terry? To which the answer was, I'm not sure.
So what convinced you?
Meeting Terry.
Okay. And at what point did you bring Chris on?
I can't remember. You came and met me. We went and had a coffee somewhere, and I was intrigued by doing anything about Banksy because I thought it was something. There was, he was a kind of enigmatic figure, and I think I knew him through some friends of mine as well. Knew of him through some friends of mine, and I thought it would be a kind of interesting proposition. The Terry side of it really only came up when you gave me a sort of suitcase full of tapes and said, "Right, let's start and have a look at what's in here."
It isn't the best pitch in the world, is it? Because if you say to someone like, a really highly respected and in-demand editor like Chris, hey, let's make a film about Banksy, well, we're going to go and have coffee and talk about it. But then the conversation starts being, well, it's not really about Banksy, it's about this French guy who apparently he's amazing and he's got all this film, but I don't know what it is, I haven't seen any of it. So it was a ridiculously convoluted and, it wouldn't have made sense. If we were pitching it to a film company or to anyone,
sure,
it wouldn't have made sense. But because it had a genuine, let's see what happens, and I guess Chris was intrigued enough to delve into these suitcases that started arriving in London.
But I think there was the ambition, Banksy had the ambition early on that there might still be a truly great street art film in Terry's rushes. He'd been around street artists for decades, or at least a decade, I don't know if it was decades, filming the biggest people as they rose to become prominent artists in the field. And so, without having looked at all the material, Banksy still felt, I know he was there when, Shepard Fairey did that piece. So that's street art history, there must be a film there. And so our initial approach to it was, is there a conventional street art film in these suitcases full of unmarked DV tapes? And there were hundreds and hundreds of them, and none of them had anything written on them. Or if they did, it was enigmatic, scrappy, a B or a C or a date or a name, none of which meant anything to us really at the time. So we just sort of dived in, and the answer to that big question quite early was no. There isn't a conventional street art film in these suitcases full of DV tapes, because the way Terry shot, everything about his involvement with the material was weird and strange. He wandered in, he set cameras up that didn't actually cover the action that he was trying to film, and wandered in. There'd be a shot of the back of his head for 40 minutes. Some of the tapes had no sound on them. None of it really made much sense, so it was kind of detective work to work out really what any of it meant for us. And that was really the first weeks were spent scratching our heads thinking, I don't know what any of this is.
So just to give some context, how many people here have actually seen the film? So that Terry went around and he filmed pretty much constantly anything and everyone he was with. So he had, like I say, hundreds. How many hours of footage had he accrued over the years?
No one knows.
Yeah. We've been asked the question a lot. We still don't know, even knowing that we ought to know. I would say about 1,000.
Right.
I think we probably had access to about 1,000.
Yeah, but
there was also another unknown amount of thousands of hours, including some which Terry enigmatically told us were bricked inside a wall in a house that he used to live in. So there could be another 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 hours. We don't know. We actually don't.
We were quite relieved that it stopped at 1,000, really, to be honest. That was enough for us to deal with.
Was that a cap you imposed yourselves?
No, we just got bored of asking him to send more tapes over.
When the thing that Banksy did early on was convince Terry to let him have the tapes. And Terry had, for anyone who's seen the film will understand that Terry has a deeply, very complicated emotional attachment. It's not just that they're his tapes. Any filmmaker, any person who had spent that long making that many hours of film would not give them up easily. But he's got a very, very complicated and emotional attachment. So just to let them out of it, it was a real struggle. And I guess that's how Banksy got the ball rolling, was by persuading Terry to let, not us, but to let him have those tapes. And he then suggested to Terry that, but while we're doing that, maybe why don't you, make some art?
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you impose a structure on this? Chris, as an editor, how do you sit down and actually turn this into a film?
It was a process of messing about, actually, and just literally looking at things and putting them together and having a bit of fun. I mean, simultaneous to our first few weeks was the Cannes Festival, if you remember, which Banksy had organised in the Arches down by Waterloo Station, which was a street art festival, and a lot of the artists that Terry had filmed were there. But Terry himself had come over for that to try his hand at being a street artist. He followed Banksy's suggestion that he'd do a bit of street art to the max, and was trying to launch himself as a street artist. So while that was happening, you were off doing a bit of filming there.
Yeah, that was the same time. And at the same time, he'd also booked out that
massive
1,000 square foot warehouse in LA. I'm sure we'll be asked about this later, so I don't want to kind of but the whole question of is it real, etc. And the very first time I met Terry, he was immediately amazing. And if you make docs like we do, it's actually quite, it's a real fun to find someone who's genuinely just brilliant on camera all the time and has no side, has no agenda, has no ability to turn it off. So I was immediately overwhelmed by him, and then he told me within minutes of meeting him that he had this 50,000 square. I just thought the guy was completely insane. But we all kind of fell in love with him, I guess, within hours of meeting him. And so at the time when he was doing the Cannes Festival in League Street, which was the big street art festival in 2008, I think, he was also planning, and he had all these minions working for him on this giant warehouse in LA, and he was really under pressure to get back there, and he was pulling his whiskers out and saying, I have 2,000 paintings to make in the next 3 weeks. So I then went to LA with him and started filming that.
Yeah.
And whilst Chris was literally kind of waiting for these hours and hours and suitcases of tape to set up. So it was, you asked about how, there was no structure, it was just chaos. And
But I think what we definitely realised was that rather than it being a film about street art, it was Terry's story, because he was so brilliant on camera. I remember cutting something together just for fun, really, and finding some really cheesy French accordion music, and having him wandering around New York buying materials to go out and do street art. And he was hilarious. The American hardware store owner, didn't understand a word he was saying. He was going, I want a bucket. You have a bucket? And the guy was going, what are you saying? I want a bucket. Can I have a bucket? It went on for ages. So I put accordion music under that and cut this rather silly 5-10 minute thing of him in his efforts to be a street artist. It was really idiosyncratic. It was very Terry, and we all really, really laughed at it. And then we thought, we can probably do something that's like that, but much longer, and actually tell Terry's story. And via Terry's story, you'll learn as much about street art as you ever want to know, because he intersected with his bizarre relationship with street art with all the biggest names and the biggest moments and the pivotal moments that, and he was right there at the genesis of this kind of new, exciting sort of art form that was coming out. So Terry was up front in all our thoughts, basically. The film's going to be about Terry, and everything else will flow from him. And once you have that, the structure starts to suggest itself, really. Yes. Although we didn't know what the end of the film was. We didn't even know what the beginning of the... We didn't really. We just waded in, really, and started putting it together. We had a middle, yeah. So it was kind of chaotic. It wasn't at all a conventional approach to documentary making.
Yeah, I think actually it's genuinely a unique space to be in creatively, because for most of what we do, we're making a film for Channel 4 or BBC, and you've got, there's a plan, there's a schedule, there's a budget. It's a thing that's going to one day be delivered. With this, we were literally working in the doc, and even in the world of feature docs, which is the other main space that filmmakers work in. You might have a passion that you've been, you might spend 10 years making it with your own money and a bit of money here and a bit of money there. This was none of those things. We were basically just working blind, not knowing whether there would be an outcome or what the outcome would be if there was one. And with the ambition at the very early stages was literally from Banksy was, look, if this ends up being a funny little or a great little 10-minute YouTube doc about some moments of street art, that's fine.
Yeah. Did Banksy have an agenda in a way? Was there something he wanted to say with the film? Did he sit down and talk about that with you guys?
Not up front. Yeah. No, like as Jaimie said, everything emerged pretty organically as we were going along, and it became obvious as we saw that the further down the line it went, and Terry and his career had launched, and he'd had this huge show in LA, and the whole thing had been so wrong. Basically, it felt wrong. It had been so, all the things that conventional street art hadn't been. Street art had been about giving things away for free, occupying public spaces, taking public space back from corporate, so many different things. But artistic and free were probably the two main components of it. And Terry was making enormous sums of money, publicising it humongously, putting himself as a figure up front in it all. So we knew that without much effort, the story of how an underground movement could easily become corrupted and commercialised was there. I mean, it was there for the taking. Terry was playing that story out right in front of us, and clearly Banksy could see that happening as well. Banksy's views of it were quite clear. He told us, he would talk frequently about how the commercialisation of most underground scenes ended up destroying them. Yeah. He'd seen his pieces being cut off walls and selling at auction. He didn't approve of that particularly. So there was a seam of, another level to the film, which was about the movement and about art and commerciality that, he was obviously keen to get in there, and Jaimie and I were working in all the time.
And there's another level to that as well, and you mentioned it earlier, Jaimie, that even today I went on several message boards about the film, and there's still people out there who are saying it's a hoax, and I have found proof that it's a hoax, and I found proof that Terry was a creation of Banksy's, even though he's a real person who exists in LA. Did that surprise you in a way, that came out of the movie, that people thought, oh, this is a Banksy prank, in a way?
Not really.
Yeah.
We were kind of... We had an early indication of it. We had a really good friend of ours who's a really good filmmaker, makes proper docs, came in and looked at something and just said, no one's ever going to believe this. And he knew, he was the guy that, he knew, because he'd seen us in the cutting room for a year or 8 months by that point. And he just looked and said, no one's ever going to believe this.
Yeah.
And that was someone who knew it was real. And and also because, it's a kind of weird thing, but because Banksy's known as, and I think in a strange way, kind of unfairly, on the most kind of purest level, Banksy is like any artist. He's just making his message available to the world through the medium that he chooses to do it with. And it's everyone else that goes, oh, he's this prankster, he's a hoaxer, he's a mischievous chameleon. He's basically just an anonymous guy putting his work in the world, and that's really what he's doing. And it's everybody else that labels. Remember, one of the things I think is quite compelling about the film is that the rise of Banksy, but also the rise of street art, the rise of graffiti culture, happened in sync with the rise of social media and celebrity culture, and the idea of people doing interesting stuff and not wanting to be known not wanting their faces to be known, not wanting their names to be known, was quite intriguing. So it was all these things were happening at the same time. And just going back to one of the earlier things you raised was that I think in some sense the agenda for Banksy was, remember, he's had probably every filmmaker in the world trying to make a film about him for years. Yeah. And in one way, making this film kind of gets people off his back, because one thing he always felt, and he didn't. I don't think he meant this in a cruel way at all. But he said, for any movement or any film about a movement, you need a guy that's going to fall off the ladder. You need the clown. You need the prankster. Yeah. And that's what Terry gave us. So in a kind of quite fundamental way, Terry kind of became the front person for this entire movement, and that was that became the street art film, which I think was the ultimate agenda.
And we were aware, as Jaimie said, we would watch it, and we would, the story is literally unbelievable. When you watch it, if you know the story, even if you knew, and we'd watch the events and we'd say, no one's going to believe it. It is literally an unbelievable narrative. The way that Terry started and why he did it and the way he ended up and the ramifications of what he did. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. But I think what added to that was that clearly, as an anonymous street artist, Banksy was never going to do any publicity for the film. And so it opened in a kind of a vacuum. And quite soon, some critics wrote positive things about it, but of course, it could all be a prank. And that became the narrative. And quite soon, when it opened in America, for instance, people said, oh, it's that prank film, it's the fake film, it's not real. And that ran on for quite a long time until we...
And just weirdly, it came out at the same time as Catfish and I'm Still Here, the Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
So there was suddenly a movement of fake documentaries. It wasn't just us, it was two others.
Yeah.
And obviously we had nothing to do with those other two films. And in fact, whether those are real or not is of no concern to us. But we were being made to kind of defend our film. And then partly it was like, well, do we defend it? Why should we defend it? I mean, I think anyone that knows anything about film would know instantly that you simply couldn't make Terry up. I mean, it would be too hard. You'd be, I mean, to make Terry up, you would be winning Oscars for screenwriting and feature films, not for, you would be out of the documentary category. But yeah, it was seen as a kind of, I guess you find what you're looking for, don't you? And for me and Chris sitting there, we were literally going, this is unbelievable. So for people who weren't in on the process, that becomes a therefore it's not true. And there was one example early on it was a year into the cut when we were nearly finished. And do you remember when the Madonna album came out? Yeah. So basically, Terry was commissioned by Madonna to do her greatest hits album sleeve. And at this point, we're both thinking, frankly, when this film comes out, it's all over for Terry. The poor, I mean, we felt, we really liked him as a person, and I felt a bit sad about that, a bit guilty. Like, oh God, all those people who bought Mr. Brainwashes, they're gonna feel really silly. And then lo and behold, Madonna commissioned her, greatest hits album, and of course people assume that that's the hidden hand of Banksy and clever, cunning in the butt, but it just actually happened.
And of course the film had no detrimental effect on the commercial value of Mr. Brainwash's work whatsoever, quite the opposite. I think the only damage to his income was the photographer who did the Run DMC photo, who successfully sued him, but I understand Terry wrote a cheque for a large sum of money without pausing at all. Millions, I think.
Do you have a favourite conspiracy theory about the film? I like the idea that Terry and Banksy are the same person.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there were so many. We spent months having these... Some people got quite angry. I remember one screening in LA where that guy started shouting at us, and it was...
Even recently, I was in a meeting for a film I'm trying to set up at the moment, and someone in the meeting started shouting at me. It's like, well, what, of course you know all about that because you're the master of hoaxing, and I'm like, well, I'm just not. It's kind of weirdly flattering, but it's also quite annoying because you don't want to be called a liar.
No, and we were very pleased at the end that we'd managed to make something through absolutely bizarre circumstances that rang very true and was actually a very honest film. It's one of the most honest films we've ever made, because we were literally cutting it as the events were happening. It was almost like news. Terry was going out and doing this stuff. It was coming in and we were forming it into sequences, and then the film was finished. And we were quite happy that it did have this other level to it that, spoke about street art and commerciality and all that. And we were quite happy to talk about that. And so for people to dismiss it as just a bit of silly fun pranking, trying to pull the wool over your eyes, felt like it was reducing it somewhat. I think Banksy felt the same as well. And when it came to certainly, people started to say it could be it could get nominated for some awards. It was made very plain to us that wasn't going to happen until the Oscars people in particular, the Academy, were convinced that it was actually a genuine documentary. So we ended up having to do quite a lot of explaining and to talk like this to people who said, look, it's not going to get nominated unless we believe it's real.
Okay, wow.
I mean, it did get nominated in the end, so that was fine. But yeah, I mean, it was all quite convoluted. I mean, fun, but very strange.
I think my favourite conspiracy sort of angle was that quite a lot of people think that that Banksy is so powerful that he can manipulate the past, so that all of that stuff from the early 90s, like with Liam Gallagher at the age of 31 or whatever, clearly in the past. Yeah. He thinks that people have actually alleged that we created all that backstory either over 10 years, so we spent 10 years doing it, or that he's so powerful he can kind of CGI people into I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, we were lucky to have Terry and have those suitcases of amazing footage, and and it is what it is. The film is what it is.
And of course, it was nominated for an Oscar. What was that experience like? Jaimie, you actually went to the ceremony, didn't you?
Yeah, we a bunch of us went. Chris, we all went. Kind of had an amazing time. It is kind of surreal, I have to say. I mean, it is kind of surreal because that's, you know, the kind of, I guess, the ultimate experience. But it was genuinely. Funnily enough, that year's Oscars, I don't know if you remember, I think, was it 2011? Right, it was actually a really dull Oscars. There's 10, was it? Anyway, there's normally a story about the Oscars. There's always like, no, is this person really going to present it and what will they say, or will that film win? And that year was quite a dull year, and the only real story was, is Banksy going to show up? And I had the very bizarre experience of being warned by the kind of, you know, the guy, the boss, the actual kind of Oscar to me. He basically said to me in no uncertain terms, like, you know, you better not mess with us. And we were like, we're just here with our film, you know. But it was a very surreal experience, and also, you know, fun. It was good.
But I mean, am I breaking the code of omerta if I tell what the actual plot was?
What was the plot?
The plot with Jim, the guy that the homeless.
I think that has to. I don't know. I can barely remember it. Well, yeah. I mean, I think there was a plan in the unlikely event that we won. But
okay. If you were,
but it wasn't Banksy. Banksy was never going to be anyway. I mean, one of the things about how he operates is that when he does anything like a big event or whatever, like Disneyland, you know, recently. I mean, he's not going to be anywhere near that because he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be spotted. I mean, if he wanted to be in public, he would have been years ago.
Are you still in touch with Banksy? When was the last time you saw him?
I ran into him maybe at the end of last year.
Like, ran into him on the golf course.
Exactly. We had cocktails.
And Jaimie, do you still keep in touch?
I've been a bit involved with Disneyland recently. We both do other things outside of the world of Banksy, but it's always fun to dip your toes back in.
Every now and again. Okay, we got time for some questions now from the audience. So if you, there's a hand that's gone up, a couple of hands have gone up right away. Fantastic.
Hi, my name's Louis. A couple of positives. This Exit is one of my favourite documentary films. I watch it all the time. I probably watched it more times than you guys have. And Thierry's actually a really nice guy. I met Thierry when he did his London show a few years back, and he took time out to talk to me. He's actually a really nice person. I'm not a big fan of his artwork, to be honest with you. And I think what you said about how commercial now street art's become, do you think the film's guilty of making street art less affordable than it used to be? You know, Banksy's prices are so inflated now, and it's probably very unlikely that Banksy will never do another a run of prints. I mean, do you think the film's been guilty of doing that?
I think, there's a sequence in the film which shows, well, there are two sequences. There's an early sequence where you see Banksy dumping the telephone box in Soho Square. That's it. That was it. Street art done. His piece was done. And then subsequently you see it selling for $500,000, I think it was, at Sotheby's. That process of hyperinflation had already happened. Street art had already gone over to the dark side. So I don't think I think if anything, our film reminded people of the honest and origins of it and the reasons why people set out to do street art in the first place. I'd hope that it didn't add to the hyperinflation in the art market, certainly in the street art market. But there are many people who are making money out of street art still, flipping things and doing that. I don't think we contributed to the commerciality of it.
No, people do that, don't they? I mean, people are insane. We're all insane. We all buy into hype and bubbles, and it's when you see how people react to the world of street art, they're reacting about, can they make some money? Can they pick this up off the street for free? Or can they saw it off a wall? Is there money in it? And that's not what it's about. But the fact that people are making money out of it is, I think infects us all. But I very much believe that the film reflects that and didn't cause it.
Well, that was clearly something on Banksy's mind. I mean, the title itself is about the commercialization of street art and art itself. I mean, did he talk to you about the title and his ideas behind that? And were there any alternative titles, in fact?
Alternative titles. I remember one. I don't know if we're allowed to say it though. I mean, it would be asterisk, 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 asterisk. There were 3, yeah.
I'll admit I wasn't a fan of Exit Through the Gift Shop as a title, which I now see as a really brilliantly inspired title. At the time, I just thought it didn't play well. I mean, it kind of does sum it up, and it is a thing, right? You know, you go to a museum or a theme park or whatever, you do literally. I mean, I remember years ago taking my kids to Battersea Park Zoo and being really annoyed that you couldn't leave without going through a gift shop, which is, you know, it's kind of annoying, isn't it? Because
they funnel you, yeah.
Yeah, it's just what more naked commercialism can there be than forcing you through a kind of alley of consumerism
full of kid bait.
Yeah, it's kiddie bait. You know, it's horrible. It's like, you know, it's so actually I think it was a great title, but I mean, God, we must have had millions of
alternates. Okay, there was some other people over here with questions.
Thank you. The style of the film is so vibrant, and the fun you had is very, very clear. But I'd love you. Could you talk a bit more about the process of cinematography and into edit, because it's just joyous.
Chris.
It was so ramshackle that to talk about it in those kind of broken down terms is quite difficult. It was basically our only thing was that we're telling Terry's story, so that led us down into strange ways of putting the film together that weren't necessarily conventional, but we always thought it is supposed to be funny, so if there was ever an opportunity to have a joke, for him to fall over, to spill paint, to run into a wall, to fall off a ladder, we knew that was in. And I suppose once you start with that approach, and we knew that we wanted the audience to laugh, so the music and everything else fell in with that. You know, we wanted the audience to have permission to think this is a funny character and not to take it apparently seriously at the start. Hence, we kept that kind of accordion music in that I played with quite early. That then became a theme. So musically, we then started to have those scenes. We were keen just to try and do something that felt organic and funny and real, and because it was such an unbelievable story, and we could see that the audiences were going to find it, you know, we're going to be in disbelief at a lot of the things that were going on. We thought, well, we're just going to send it all up and have fun with it. And literally, their jaws are going to hit the floor anyway, so we might as well have fun and bump that up. As far as cinematography goes, I mean, Terry's cinematography is so lamentable that a lot of work had to be done to wrangle still frames, to stabilize shots, to refocus shots. We actually degraded some of the better stuff that Jaimie and other camera people shot when they were out covering the LA show. We slightly softened it. We added fake wobble to it a little bit so that it matched with Terry's. Otherwise, it would feel like you'd get seasick and then bonk, you'd be straight and there'd be a locked-off shot. It almost knocked you out of your seat in the cinema. So we actually did a bit of technical work to mess up some of the better shot stuff so it matched with Terry's. I mean, the whole style, it felt organic. It was great fun, and there were serious points to be made, but we thought if you make a serious point lightly and with a joke, you're going to get away with it much better and audiences will like it. We kind of knew that we would get reactions from people that 2 days after they'd watched it, they'd go, hang on, and we'd get a text message or we'd get a phone call saying, but hang on, but now, and they would inspire people to have a little thought about art or about, you know, was he a real artist, wasn't he, was that real, wasn't it real, but how did that happen? And so we knew there was a delayed effect, but yeah, I mean, it's just, we tried to make it as fun and lively and as not a serious art film as we could possibly manage.
It's a very tight, I think it's 86 minutes.
Yep.
The film, was there a much longer cut at one point?
No, because the first thing Chris said on day one, well, it probably wasn't on day one, it was really when it started looking like it was going to be a film rather than nothing, was Chris was adamant that it couldn't be longer than, was it 90 minutes?
Yeah.
And I said, well, why? And he's like, because no one's going to care after 90 minutes. And you were quite right. And you know, there is a thing especially in feature docs, they can be quite indulgent. I mean, this didn't start off as a feature doc, which is what it became, but that world of feature docs, people, because they've worked on their passion project for 11 years, they think it's okay for it to be 3.5 hours long. No one else does. So, yeah, it was, I guess the more important truth about that is that the film could have been a lot longer, and obviously there were lots of things we could have done. But finally, in a weird sort of fundamental way, the film was always kind of going to be what it was, because there wasn't much more happening than what the story is amazing and ridiculous and unpredictable. But I mean, one thing is that, you know, people think that because we had thousands of tapes, there was an infinity of stories about Terry, but that's not true. The story of Terry is the story of Terry, and we were just lucky that because he's so incredible with his filming, it's on camera. You know, but that is his story. You know, we do follow his arc, his genuine arc in life, not as a feature film, but as a documentary. So the film was kind of never going to be like, you know, 5 parts or 4 hours, or there's not a sequel.
I just wanted to ask, from the point where Banksy brought you in, how hands-on was he with this? And did you ever feel at any point like maybe he was subtly pulling strings? And did you ever feel maybe like you were actually, because I know you mentioned that you dislike the idea that you'd be lying to people. Do you ever feel that maybe that you were kind of being hoaxed
Puppets.
as well?
Yeah, we were, yes.
Yeah, like pawns.
Pulling the strings. Nah, quite candidly. No, I mean, as I say, it was also organic. He was in a lot. You know, he was in and out. I mean, he's a busy man. He was doing lots of other stuff at the same time, but he, you know, he was frequently in with us in the cutting room, watching stuff, making suggestions, working on sequences, all that. So he's never made a film before. You know, he had people record things that his hits, but he was very open and candid and fine. So no, I mean, there really wasn't time for any kind of manipulation or any of this kind of subtle coded stuff that other people have thought at all, and we definitely don't think that we were kind of hoodwinked. It happened as exactly as we've described. But he was very involved all the way through.
You see, I was just thinking that about, you know, Thierry Goeta, what he did about your film was made 5 years ago. What I found, it has more relevance today than it did because of the celebrity culture and all that. Now, talking about another crazy Frenchman again, French person, have you been approached to do anything about Viviane Mayer?
Viviane Mayer,
Yes.
the photographer.
Yes.
Well, the guy made the documentary about her.
No, I'm not talking the missionary documentary by Alan Yentob. You have something in your line of editing and it's restructuring. Because I find Viviane Mayer and Thierry Goeta are the same people in some ways, hoarders.
Yep.
It just, you say the joys of filming without the end product at all.
Yeah. No, I
Because-
think that's a very good observation. I mean, did you see Viviane Mayer? Finding Viviane Mayer. It's a lovely little film, and I absolutely agree with you.
Oh, this was the woman in New York whose
who was a
cash
nanny.
was discovered like 30, 40...
Absolutely, and she went out. She was
of
secretly.
course.
The difference is her photographs, her art was beautiful and extraordinary. Terry's wasn't.
No, you see, no.
That's very subjective. Very subjective.
No, you see, that's the whole point I'm making.
I think the point, well, one point I agree with you on, if this is the point you're making, is that I think, and Chris will disagree with me, 5 years on, I'm now firmly of the opinion that Terry is a genuine artist. Yes. He really is an artist. He doesn't know he's an artist. Well, he does know he's an artist. He's not an artist in the way that we like to think of artists, but he falls, for me, firmly in that category of outsider art, unschooled, untutored, kind of planned in many ways. And I think there's something about Terry that for me is the mark of an artist. Is he's compulsive and it's uncontrollable, and he makes and he makes and he makes. And we can sit there and go, it's all a bit rubbish.
Or plagiarised.
Which is, or copied.
Or copied.
But frankly, I think that Terry, I think history will have a kinder view of Terry than we have.
Yeah, no, listen, he's not calculating, I'll give you that, definitely. He hasn't planned anything, he just runs on instincts, and it's the craziest instinct you could possibly get.
Hi. Just a quick question. The Disney scene was really, really funny in that film. What other challenges, because obviously they would have prosecuted you if you, along with that scene, if they went ahead with that, did you have any other challenges doing that particular scene?
Just to be clear, that was way before we were involved. So, because that scene where, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, it follows Terry and Banksy on this incredible escapade, this kind of mission they go on in Disneyland in California, and it's actually it's quite it's a suspenseful and kind of compelling kind of point in the film. It's also important in the film because it's where Terry proves himself to Banksy that he's a man who can be trusted. But yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, we were literally dealing with the rushes for that. They'd recorded that maybe 2 or 3 years or 5 years, I can't remember, earlier, and it was a great scene to cut. We were obviously keenly aware of the legal pitfalls of that, and the lawyers who then, as the film got nearer to actually A, being a real film, and B, it might actually come out, then those kind of concerns become more real. So those were certainly considered. I'm not sure. I mean, there wasn't really big challenges legally, I don't think, or kind of morally, or I mean, I guess for us in a way, our challenge was to represent Terry fairly. And one thing we were concerned about early on, and I mean this with the best kind of intentions, is that we were at one point. I mean, we were sort of worried about Terry's mental state. So we thought, as people that are trying to be responsible filmmakers, we didn't want to make a film that lots of people would laugh at about this guy is not aware that what he's doing is funny. But I think as time went on, I think we became.
Well, what did he say when you showed it to him? And with that cautious, we showed it as you do to most of your contributors. You give them the chance to watch it and give their notes and come back. And and as Jaimie said, there was some concern about how he was going to react. And what did he say?
He said, "It is the best film I have ever seen in my whole life."
So there we
I
are.
think from that point we were okay. Terry's on board.
That is a fantastic note on which to end. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for your questions. And thank you, Chris Tim and Jaimie D'Cruz. Thank you so much.